Welcome to the LDN Radio Show, brought to you by the LDN Research Trust. I'm your host, Linda Elseygood. I have an exciting lineup of guest speakers who are LDN experts in their field. We will be discussing low-dose naltrexone and its many uses in autoimmune diseases, cancers, etc. Thank you for joining us. This show is sponsored by Dixon's Chemist, who are the experts in LDN and associated treatments in the UK. Dixon's Chemist are the most cost-effective for LDN in all forms within the UK and Europe, maintaining safety standards far in excess of what is required. Why would you choose to get your LDN from anywhere else? Call 0141 404 6545 today to speak to their LDN experts. Today I'm joined by Dr. Elissa Mullen, who practices general adult medicine and specialises in chronic disease, weight loss, bioidentical hormones and natural solutions to ageing. She's from the Seattle Wellness Programs. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Mullen.
Hey, good morning. Morning from Seattle.
It's wonderful to have you here with us. Could you tell us a bit about yourself, please?
Well, this is a second career for me as I'm a naturopathic physician. I went to Bastyr University, which I always make sure it labels itself as the finest naturopathic university in the world. I had someone once email me about that self-designation. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not the publicist. I didn't make that claim, but they're a very great university. They're on the shores of Lake Washington, and I've sat on the board of trustees there. I've known most of the past presidents, and I was very active into the school, and I still train residents and interns there for Bastyr at my private practice. I have a degree in health psychology, and my work was really in response and how people respond to change. I was lucky to be able to do a bit of an internship at the Fred Hutch cancer research and breast cancer research, and I was part of the health psychology team, and they look at how people react to change, which as a naturopath is part of what I do, is people, working with people and when they want to change and in the change models, it works really well. I work with adults mostly. I have just started working a little bit in pediatrics with children with some chronicity that other doctors have not been able to figure out exactly what's going on with the child. And usually I benefit because I see where the other doctors have not looked. I look there, and that's usually where it is.
Okay. So have you always been in Seattle? Was that where you...
No, I'm from California. I'm from
okay.
California.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we were in California, and I kept getting farther into natural medicine and looking at natural medicine. And I met a naturopath there that actually was from NC and in Portland. And then a mutual friend, her husband, it was really my friend's father-in-law, had gone to Bastyr and knew Dr. Bastyr. And at that time, he was the president of University in Bellingham, Washington. And so I said, I keep hearing about Bastyr. And she said, well, I know Joe Pizzorno, her mother-in-law did. So would you like to go up there? And so she introduced me to Joe, the founder, one of the founders of Bastyr. And I came up here, and my husband and I toured the campus. We actually stayed on the campus. Met with Joe, looked at what it would take for me to go back to school, because I tell them my patients the sad news is I'm a musician, and this is my second job, so my day job. So I decided that we talked about it, and we decided we'd like to do this. We had different projects in California that were rolling up because we had a cattle ranch, and the partner had passed away, so we were closing that. And my husband said, well, we might as well. So we sold off, we packed up, we drove off without even a place to live in, a rental, and moved to Seattle.
Wow. What an adventure.
Went back to school. It was quite an adventure. My husband went back to school too. His joke was always, I was studying so hard, there was nothing much going on at home.
Mm-hmm.
So he went back to school and got his MBA at the time also. So we both just sat and studied, and I went to school and he worked, and I was at the Fred Hutch and going to school. And then I had to go back and get a few more undergraduate credits in some sciences like chemistry. When I decided to do naturopathic medicine, I looked at PhD. I was in Trinity. I was over in Ireland, looking at a position working with a Fulbright in responsive, which was my thesis as a health psychologist, and at the Fred Hutch. And I realized that a lot of research is a lot of politics. So it wasn't a real good fit because I didn't understand how to work within that field. I'm pretty independent. So since I was also accepted into the medical program, and that's what I did, I went ahead and went into the medical program. Mm-hmm. But originally, no, from California, from the Central Valley. Mm-hmm.
Oh. I think it's very brave packing up and just moving like that. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who would think, I would love to do that, just to start again, pack up and move. But
yes, I was in my 40s.
Hats off to you. It's very brave, isn't it? It's just throwing everything to the
I always
wind.
say you're going to be the same age regardless of what you do, so you might as well get going.
Yes, wonderful. And how did you hear about LDN?
Well, in my practice, I was so lucky in developing my practice because we live in West Seattle. And we had come to West Seattle from Kirkland for church. We're Lutheran. And we had heard about a motivational speaker here that was just an intern pastor. And he turned out being here 3.5 years. But as I was here and I was sitting on the health board, our church actually had a health board, the community health board. The doctor that was head of it, Dr. Seahog, his naturopathic license was number 22 here in the state. And he'd actually worked with Dr. Bastier. And he had a practice in a building, and he offered me the building when I graduated at quite a reduced rent. And the Dr. Seahog is still with us. He's 97.
Oh, wow.
He's very lovely. He was the first chiropractor in West Seattle also. Mm-hmm. His mother had been a chiropractor from Norway. He's Norwegian. And so as I developed my practice there, it has several rooms. I'm able to sublet them. That paid my rent before I had enough practice under my belt. But I had a young doctor in there with me for a while, and she decided she'd rather teach. And she had a patient that was coming to her that she had met through some networking, and he was using naltrexone and sort of chewing off tablets for his restless leg syndrome. And he came in to talk to her. And of course, she was packing up and going, and she wasn't there that day. She was climbing a mountain. And I said, well, she's leaving, but if you'll let me research this over the weekend, I don't have room today and come back in on Monday, then I'll be happy to work with you. Well, I spent all weekend reading what was available and watching videos from the LDN site about low dose naltrexone. And I was mesmerized. And my biochemistry is one of my stronger points. I actually was a biochem a teaching assistant at Bastyr and taught and tutored in biochemistry. So I was just fascinated about the upregulation of the enkephalins and what LDN did. And from there, I work with herbs with the low dose naltrexone, as some doctors now work with Neurontin with the low dose naltrexone. I've always worked with herbals because naturopaths can dispense. So I've always worked with an herbal blend from the eclectics, which are the original naturopaths, in the same way that MDs work with Neurontin or other NDs work with Neurontin. And so I started working with it and started posting on the LDN sites and talking to people. And it just has taken off since then. And I've tried to subscribe to every LDN conference to learn more and more. And it's just, a lot of times I sit there and I think, well, I already knew that. Or one of them, I had one of the doctors that was speaking, he would lean over and he'd say, now, how does that work? And I would draw the pathway for him. I said, this is how it works. In fact, interesting enough, on this little street I live here overlooking the ocean in Pacific Puget Sound here in West Seattle, I have a doctor up the street, and I call anybody my neighbor that I can see with my binoculars as my joke. So be careful if you live near me. And so we were at a neighborhood, Christmas party or Boxing Day party, and I've always tried to get him to get to know him a little better. He's not very friendly, and he said he worked at Chick Shadle. I said, where do you work? And I said, oh, you must know naltrexone then. I said, I've always worked with it with small doses, starting with MS. He grabbed my arm, and he said, I was the original doctor for naltrexone company. I traveled and explained to the different addiction centers how to work with naltrexone in the 80s. Oh, wow. He said, right away, we saw people were healing. We saw things were happening. Do we know why now? Oh, yes, we know why. So I was sitting, and on the back of cocktail napkins, I was drawing the biochemical pathways for it. And my husband said, well, John got friendly. I go, who knew? He's still not friendly, by the way. But, I said, well, that's what Dr. Bahari knew. He said, I knew Bahari. Very fascinating. And he still works in the for Chick Shadles and, in the addiction field. That's just fascinating because he became so animated, and he's a very quiet, reserved person. Mm-hmm. And he was so animated and it grabbed my arm. It was just fascinating.
Oh, it's amazing. A wonderful story.
Mm-hmm, it is.
So when did you actually start prescribing LDN? How long ago was that?
I'd say probably 8 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
I always forget how long I've been in practice. The years just seem to go by. I don't feel I'm any older, but our grandchildren are taller than all of us now. So, yeah. But yes, at least 8 years probably I've been working with low dose naltrexone. In fact, one of the few compounders, Skips here in Florida, mm-hmm. with who I had first started working with, because you couldn't find anybody that really would compound it that knew what you were talking about. And the pushback, the resistance from my referring partners, my MDs. I'm a part of a Virginia Mason. I'm what's called a referring community partner. But I even had someone within just recently say, "Oh, she's fringe." I said, "Well, you better talk to Mayo Clinic and Berkeley and all these wonderful universities now that are working with it. And now there's low dose naltrexone they're pairing it with Wellbutrin, so we're not so fringe anymore, are we?"
Mm.
Not so.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you said you started with MS. What other conditions have you
mm-hmm.
used LDN for?
Oh, fibromyalgia, psoriasis quite a bit. One of the most fascinating parts of the psoriasis picture is a lot of my psoriasis patients have had a trauma in their life as a young person, a variety of traumas, a lot of sexual abuse, and they didn't sleep, and they had PTSD, and so they tend at night. They're always aware. And that break in the sleep pattern, and therefore the break in the development of the beta endorphins, that POMC pre-opioid melanocortin, pre-prohormone, is disrupted. The HPA axis is disrupted when they're young, and it never quite heals. I just had another patient came in, and she had been going to different doctors, and she saw that my practice I had fatigue quite a bit, and she started talking to me, and I always ask, how did this start? And she said, well, when I was a teenager, when they have a discrete time, you pretty can surmise that there's been an incident. And I said, did you have a trauma? And yes, she did. And I find that is such a polycrest, this lack of sleep. I had a couple physicians and doctors that work with me, and I'll say, have you had a trauma? And they know. And then eventually they say, well, yes. And some of them are pretty graphic traumas that they didn't understand that we're disrupting the HPA axis because their sleep was disrupted. And they ask, if I do a sleep study, excuse me, I have everyone that comes into my practice, whether it's general practice, fill out a sleep study. How do you sleep? How long do you sleep? What's disrupting your sleep? And I get some pushback about this has nothing to do with my illness. I said, you don't know, because health is a Venn diagram. I teach and practice health hygiene, and unfortunately, you can't just take one part out of your health and say, this is what's causing, as a naturopath, we look at obstacle to cure. And really, the biggest obstacle to cure is when people are not sleeping, or their sleep is disrupted, post-traumatic stress syndrome, PTSD. So psoriasis, I'm finding that's one of the obstacles, is that underlying cause. I work with just, my gosh, everything that LDN helps with, especially autoimmune disease. I've just started, because of the last symposium and the doctor's discussion on the gut, on the enkephalins. I've gone back and restudied the enkephalins, and I had a psychiatrist, MD, psychologist call me, wanted to work with me in understanding LDN better for his practice. So we were talking about the enkephalins, and he said, do you realize that the enkephalins are responsible for 95% of the blood-brain and the gut-brain barrier? So my goodness. So when you think of leaky gut syndrome and autoimmune disease, I mean, your first place you should go is Low Dose Naltrexone, because we have to start healing that barrier, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so autoimmune diseases, just about everything. And there's people who come in, have read about Low Dose Naltrexone, and they want it for just the more anti-aging cancer defense type. And I agree. My husband and I take it. All my staff. I mean, they're just, I've only found a couple people who can't. I work with Dale Bredesen and the Bredesen Protocol Recode on the reversal of dementias and Alzheimer's. And I we've had some breathtaking results and reversals. And one of them, we started with Low Dose Naltrexone because the melanocyte stimulating hormone was so low. And that's one of the upregulations, as the LDN works with. And within 3 days, he was back. He said, my cognitive is completely changed. He also had several things, Sears syndrome, heavy metal poisoning. Once we got that all straightened out, he's back teaching.
Goodness.
I know, it's just breathtaking. That has to do with the genetics, that APO3C gene. I'm finding to be in what I call the inflammatory process, where as the body heals, and when it has an assault, whether it's mercury that it's not clearing, whether it's mold, Sears syndrome, eventually what happens with the APO3C genetics is the body doesn't recode correctly. Then we start having a buildup in inflammatory processes in the brain. And this once we can find, where this is happening, and with genetics, we now know where to look, we can repair. On about 75% of people with cognitive decline, 54% they're now calling type 3 diabetes of the brain. Mm-hmm. And that impact of insulin on the brain. And it's just LDN, because of this repair of the blood-brain and gut-brain barrier with the enkephalins, it's just absolutely crucial to use it.
Well, that's amazing. From all the patients that you have treated LDN for, have any reported any adverse effects other than sleep disturbance and vivid dreams?
I have two. One of them is one of the Bredesen patients that had cognitive confusion, so we stopped. I had one patient came to me and just demanded the ultimate, the highest dose. She wanted 5 milligrams. She was an MS patient. I said, no. You really have to taper up. And I like to use a liquid form to taper up till we find the correct dose. I don't believe anything in medicine should be a one-size-fits-all. And she just argued with me, didn't want to taper up, just wanted this. She wanted, stamp it. I said, no, especially with MS, I can't do that. So she finally got her neurologist to give her the highest dose, the 5 milligrams. She woke up in bed and could not get out of bed. She was completely tonic. Her muscles had contracted. It took 90 days for her to just get back where she had been, and then here she appeared back in my office. She said, "Oh, you were correct." Yes, I was correct. Not everyone has that problem. It's a very rare. I mean, like I can name 3 in all these years.
Wow.
It's very rare, but we have to be careful. Yes. And not everyone needs the same dose. The 3.5 dose I'm finding for about 60% of people is exactly where they need to be. Mm-hmm. I think one of the questions I can never answer, I tell them I didn't get a crystal ball with my stethoscope and white jacket, is how long do you need to be on LDN? Uh-huh. If someone has MS, I believe it's an autoimmune against the myelin sheath. And is that caused now? I'm rethinking that. Is that caused by the gut-brain barrier that, not being permeable. And once we get that repaired, the immune reaction to the myelin goes away. I don't know. That's one of my I always got my hums. I'm wondering, but I don't know. Do you need to stay adult the rest of your life? I do. It just is. That's one of my philosophies.
Well, I have MS and I've been taking LDN for 14 years, just over. And there is no way I would stop taking it. I wouldn't want to suffer the consequences of it reversing back to how I was.
I know, absolutely.
But
absolutely.
I mean,
I have people that will stop it, in it, like they're on vacation or they forget to take it. And they'll have one Lyme's disease recently. And she said, oh my gosh, in 2 days, I was back to my mental fog. And we're working with every factor in the Lyme's disease, using the erythromycin low dose and LDN. But some people quickly have a reversal, which is sort of fascinating.
Mm-hmm. We did a study several years ago, did a questionnaire, and some people would say they noticed something the very next day of taking LDN, where they have slept better than they've slept days, for years.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are other people who have found that their MS or whatever condition they had stabilized. It didn't get any worse, but it didn't get any better. And with a progressive disease, for it to stabilize is still good news, isn't it? But then they found after taking it 15 to 18 months of it being stable, they then started to get symptom relief. I don't understand that, but it was
it's the mu receptor.
Okay.
It's the mu receptor. It's the opioid receptor, that mu receptor. I always tell people it's the answer and it's the problem. I have worked with some Lou Gehrig folks, or alateral and primary lateral sclerosis, and my patients have been followed by the Lou Gehrigs. And it relieves symptoms, but it doesn't turn the disease around. And that's when I really found the need to fluctuate the dosage sometimes, because we'll go clear back to the lowest dose because we're almost tricking that mu receptor into resetting itself. Mm-hmm. Because the mu receptor is so ubiquitous, and most of it's in our guts. When we say we have a gut reaction, we actually do, right? And that's the issue, is the mu receptor and the person's ability to have that reaction piggybacked on the beta endorphins production, and therefore the upregulation of the mu receptors in and outside of the cell we're finding in different parts of the cell. That's one of the new really interesting pieces of research from the last symposium. Mm-hmm. That doctor from Rutgers, he talked about that the lower the dose, the different doses will actually work in different parts of the cells. That means the mu receptors in different parts of the cells. And that's what I'm seeing is can sometimes, but that's really more in chronic, really in long-term chronic issues.
No, I know that you have been prescribing LDN for many years, and you're a naturopathic doctor who looks at the body as a whole. So everybody is individual and their treatment is individual. But what would you say are the most common herbs, for example, that you use alongside of LDN?
Yeah, the herbs I use, like I said, are a blend from the eclectics. It's not a new blend at all. And valerian, passion flower, oats, and melissa. Those are the herbs that the eclectics have used as a blend to work with the brain. And now we know why. It's that regulation of dopamine. And I've found that they work very well with it. Now, some people, I can get it. There are a couple companies that make it in a powdered form. So I don't do, when people don't like the liquid herbal, but we actually have a really precise way of dispensing. We worked on that right away with special dispensers and inserts into my bottles and into the bottles we buy, and we buy pharmaceutical grade. And we've worked with different companies for the herbals. I'm now working with a company from Arizona. They have the finest quality, I'm finding. Consistent quality. And that's what you need. Mm-hmm. And those are the herbs I use.
Okay. Now, if any of our listeners would like to come and visit you and have a consultation, where do they go to? How do they get hold of you?
Well, They can go to seattlewellnessprograms.com, and they can go to a company called ZocDoc. That's how people can make appointments right online. ZocDoc is ZocDoc. On my website, there's a link to ZocDoc, and they can make appointments there. They can call my office, which the phone number is on the website, but it's 206-388-2929, and they can speak to one of my staff members and make an appointment to come in. One thing I no longer can do, over the phone or 15-minute consults. It's just my practice has developed to such a large extent. I have to be able to give all my time. Most of my patients, I do have a body of patients that are just my general patients. I do their annual physicals, and they come in for cold and flu. But I have so much chronicity now, and working with the RECODE system, the reversal of Alzheimer's, working with LDN and chronicity, that I can't give my time away when I have patients with chronic that we're working so desperately and deeply. So people have to make an appointment to come in.
Mm-hmm. And do you have a waiting list?
No, right now I do not. I do not. We're usually able to get someone within a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's very good. And what advice do you give people about diet?
Oh my goodness, I am so involved with that. Well, ketogenics. That's how I found Dr. Bredesen with his RECODE. I was reading his program, his research, and the first tenet was ketogenics, getting away from sugars. Because people look, sugar is bad for you. That's not true. It's the insulin's response to sugars. Insulin is inflammatory. Yes, we need it. It's how sugars, how our glucose works in most, but not all cells. But insulin itself, when it spikes, and that's really set genetically, how our body responds. And fruit is right up there with sugars. And people don't like to hear that, the banana is not necessarily good for you. And the fact that sweeteners, whether they're the nasty aspartame to stevia, which everyone feels is so natural, if someone has an insulin response that's becoming inflammatory, the brain just doesn't know the difference, especially with a BMI that's up over 30. And Dr. Bredesen's research, this RECODE, the reversal of dementias and Alzheimer's, the first tenet is to get this into control. And the ketogenic diet, the intermittent fasting, whether it's just, 8 hours a day you're fasting, you're getting at least 9 hours of sleep a night, 8 hours of sleep and fasting that time, limiting your body's response to the non-complex sugars, which just means fiber, higher fiber diet, good lean proteins. Don't eliminate any food group. I'm not a fan of this new vegan fad. When people eliminate any food group, then there's going to be a deficit somewhere in your system. We're just not a closed system. Even grains. Let's look for a grain that works for you. If you're gluten intolerant, let's find something that fits in the picture for you. Mm-hmm. But that's the number one area, and I've worked with that. In fact, that's what really led me down this path. I just had a friend visit. I took a course. My kids, who I always joke are older than me now, both had pneumonia when they were small. And I thought, my goodness, I never got pneumonia. What's going on here? So I took a class around nutrition in the Bible from a friend of mine, Dr. Patrice Gaddis, is who she is. She was just here to visit. And I started cooking differently. And I started looking at food differently, and a whole foods diet, and eating with the seeds in there in the Central Valley, California, pretty easy to do, the breadbasket of the world. And that led me down this whole path. And then I started looking, probably 25 years ago, ketogenics, and even Dr. Atkins, and he called it the Harvard diet at the time, and eliminating the unnecessary sugars so that you don't have the insulin response. And now, with his breathtaking results of research of 54% of cognitive decline is caused by this factor, you just feel really verified, mm-hmm. that this is what we have to do first. We've got to go back to eating with the season, a whole foods diet, complex carbs, high fiber, and exercise daily. And exercise where you're training for something, even if it's just training to be healthier, so that there's a little higher level of physical fitness, not just, let me see if I can get a 15-minute walk in here and go home and sit down again. No, we need to look at our health as it's a gift, that we have to guard it. Does that answer?
Yes,
You can see I'm passionate about it, can't you? Yes,
definitely.
yes.
Well, it's been amazing. We've come to the end of our show, and I think we could have gone on for another half an hour without any problems. And, it's been amazing. So thank you so much for being on the show today, and we will have you back.
Oh, thank you. And thanks so much for reaching out to me. It was just wonderful that you did. I've enjoyed this time.
Thank you. This show is sponsored by Dixon's Chemist, who are the experts in LDN and associated treatments in the UK. Dixon's Chemist are the most cost-effective for LDN in all forms within the UK and Europe, maintaining safety standards far in excess of what is required. Why would you choose to get your LDN from anywhere else? Call 0141 404 6545 today to speak to their LDN experts. Any questions or comments you may have, please email me, Linda, Linda, at ldnrt.org. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciated your company. Until next time, stay safe and keep well.